Hey everyone, welcome to my channel. My name is Charlie and this is Cover to Cover. Today we're going to be doing a monthly wrap-up of April, talking about the books that I read and my thoughts and feelings on them. So I read 9 books this month, which is pretty good for me, and that was a total of 2,732 pages, which, yeah, it's quite good. I put everything in my reading log. This is actually from Jack Edwards, whose YouTube channel is amazing. He actually doesn't sell these anymore and I need a new one. So if anyone has any good reading log recommendations, please tell me, because I'm in desperate need of a new one. Yes, this month I read quite a good mixture of genres, and so I'm really pleased with that. And I'm excited to get into this video and talk about these books. Okay, so the first book I read was The Seven Moons of Marley Almeida by Shahan Karunatalaka. I've been seeing this book everywhere. It was on pretty much everyone that I follow's top 10 books of 2022, and it did win the Booker Prize last year. So I had really high expectations for it. Yeah, I gave it 4 stars, but I feel like because everyone had raved about it so much, that kind of let it down for me. So basically we follow Marley Almeida, who is a war photographer in Sri Lanka in 1990. And basically he wakes up in this celestial tax office visa place, which is like heaven-esque, and he realizes that he is dead, but he doesn't know how he's been killed or who killed him. But because of the nature of his work, there's lots of people that could be suspects. So basically he has 7 moons to pass into the next part of the afterlife, which is like the peaceful part, I guess. And he basically wants to contact his like 2 favorite people in the world that have these photos, which is like all of his life's work, which will essentially rock Sri Lanka in terms of there's like political interest from all the parties with like these photos. And yeah, so basically it follows his 7 moons of trying to solve everything out and trying to make peace with what's happened until he can pass on into the next life. I thought that the world building of like the afterlife was amazing, and I think that the way that they write is beautiful. I did feel that like there was a lot of political jargon involved, and that lost me in like the middle section. But then I do recognize that I think the juxtaposition of like the beautiful fantasy of the afterlife and then like the politicalness of like what's happening in the real world is like intentional. But I did just, yeah, I got halfway through and I was kind of like, this is a bit of a slog. And for something that people rated like so highly, that was like, ever so slightly let me down. But overall, it's a pretty great book, and I would recommend people reading it. Yeah. The next book I read this month was The Beekeeper of Aleppo by Christy Lefteri. I got this at the airport and I actually had no idea what it was about, and I hadn't heard any recommendations about it, which is quite surprising now. After reading it, lots of people have read it and loved it. I thought it was beautiful. Her writing is stunning. So basically we follow a couple that are called Nuri and Afra, and Nuri is a beekeeper and Afra is an artist. And essentially they have to leave Syria, or Aleppo where they're from, due to the war, and Afra actually becomes blind due to the tragedies that she witnesses. And basically the story goes of them trying to reach Great Britain and seek asylum, and so they travel through Europe trying to get to Great Britain, but also on the way, like their relationship, because of the tragedies that they've seen, like their relationship is like gone in opposite directions, and so they're traveling to to Great Britain, but they're also like on a journey to find their love for each other again, which is like very cleverly done, I think. The theme of bees is woven really well throughout the book, and Nuri, the husband, will like constantly reflect on his time in Aleppo and how beautiful the scenery was and how gorgeous his bee colonies were. And yeah, it's just so stunning, really. We also look at the privilege of language and how that helps people seeking asylum. Afra, the wife, doesn't speak very good English, but Nuri does because of his cousin that used to work on the bee farm? Colin? What's that called? You know, where the bees live. So he would always come, and so he would help him with his English. So that is an interesting dynamic that we see throughout the book with how knowing English helps people seeking asylum here. But overall, this book was beautiful, and I'd highly recommend the read. The next book I read this month was 100 Boyfriends by Brontes Purnell. This is a collection of short stories, I believe there was 100, of queer people. And we talk about love and sex and drugs and queerness. Overall, it was good. I gave it 3 stars. I really liked the matter-of-factness about it. It was very in your face, but in some of the stories it was slightly jarring. And I did feel like there wasn't really like a very good flow in general of the stories. I'll come to it later with another short story book I read, but I don't know, I kind of felt it was quite stop-starty, and I think because there was 100 stories, I feel like I didn't quite get enough of anything, if that makes sense. But overall, it was a fine book. I wouldn't read it again, but yeah, it's pink. The next book I read this month was Hex by Jenny Fagan. This was a gorgeous little short story. We love a cheeky 100-pager. And basically it follows a character called Gellis Duncan, and basically Gellis is in prison waiting to be hung for witchcraft, and she gets a visitor named Iris who is from the future, and yeah, it's basically a telling of Gellis's last night before her execution. So the story is about a woman named Gellis, and she is on trial for witchcraft. And so this is the night before she is being executed. And she gets a visitor named Iris who comes from the future where women are like still persecuted for who they are. And the story goes through Gellis recounting how she was tried and found to be a witch and the injustices involved there. And there's an interesting link of this short story with how women were persecuted in the 16th century, I think, and the whole like witch trials, and also how misogyny still plays a massive part in society like currently, which I found really interesting. Jenny Fagan's writing is beautiful, and the relationship between Gellis and Iris was really, really nice to read. I will say there is a slight content warning for this. Parts of this book get quite graphic, and so I would definitely just double check before you read that this book is appropriate for you. But overall, I would recommend it because her writing is fantastic and it was definitely a very interesting read. The next book I read this month was Cemetery Boys by Aidan Thomas. Now, I got this recommendation off of TikTok, and honestly, it did not disappoint. This was a 5-star read, and it's one of those reads that I really can't wait to read again. And I really wish I could have read this when I was like 13, 14. This is like a prime example of like YA queer fiction that like just does a really great job, and I think really will help queer people moving forward, especially when they're kids. So basically we follow Yadriel, who is 17, I believe, and he is a trans man, and basically he needs to gain the approval of his family. So they recognize him as a man. However, Yadriel, his family look after this cemetery, so they're Bruos and Bruas. And in this Latinx family, they have rituals that they must do so they can perform magic. And the Bruos perform one and the Brujas perform another. And even though they recognize Yadriel as a man, they won't let him perform the rites of the men to get his magic. So essentially he takes the power into his own hands and he performs the rite himself. In doing so, he ends up summoning a ghost that's not the correct ghost that he was supposed to summon, and things happen from there. Can't really say too much because I don't want to spoil it, but it's just a prime example of like great writing. The connection between the two protagonists is gorgeous, and the family connections involved are just really lovely to read. I thought generally the pacing of this book was perfect, and honestly, like, I would want to read another like 3 books in this series. Not that I think there will be another book in the series, but it was just so gorgeous. One thing that I think Thomas, the author, did really successfully was that they brought up struggles that trans and queer people face in such a palatable way. Like, none of it seemed showy, it all felt really authentic and just read so easily. And I think specifically for like younger queer people, that will help so much. I think it's a must read, really, and I would recommend this to everybody. I really loved it. It's definitely like one of my favorite books, I think. Certainly of the year, maybe of all time. I know that's big, but read it. The next book I read this month was Hearts and Bones by Niamh Mulvey. I read this on my phone, so I don't actually have the physical copy with me. But I gave this 4 stars. It's a collection of short stories which are mainly focused on women, and overall, which I didn't like about 100 Boyfriends, I thought that there was a really good flow throughout all the stories. Specifically the last story I loved, which talks about pregnancy. I'm not going to give anything away, but yeah, there was just a general good flow to these. Also super short, and the writing style I thought was pretty great. I know lots of people had raved about it. I gave it 4 stars because I didn't think it was exceptional, but I do recognize that it was very good. I think in general for me, like, collections of short stories aren't necessarily my style of reading, because I never feel like I truly gain enough from it, if that makes sense. But overall, it was pretty good. Then I read This Much Is True by Miriam Margolyes, which is her autobiography. I'd read lots of places that this was better to read via audiobook, so that's what I did. Miriam Margolyes is like one of my favorite celebrities in general. I find her so funny. I mean, watching her on Graham Norton, like, her stories, she's just fantastic. What I did like about her autobiography was that from the start she was like, you all know me for being this crass, slightly rude telling stories on television, but actually there's a lot more to me and I'm going to be a lot more real, and that's what she was. So that was really refreshing to see like another side of Miriam. She talks about her life growing up Jewish and how she found her way into the performing arts and acting. she's literally worked with every single person under the sun. Like, her career is insane. And it was just really nice hearing her stories, really. She's very good in telling like super sincere, heartwarming stories while still weaving in her own comedy. So overall it was like a really great experience to listen to. I would definitely recommend listening to the audiobook as to reading it, or maybe doing it in tandem if you like. I don't like doing both at the same time personally, but that might work for you. The next book I read this month was Hell Followed With Us by Andrew Joseph White. I love this book so much. I gave it 5 stars. This is a horror book with chosen family-esque themes involved. Basically, we follow this character of Benji, who is a trans man, and he is on the run from a cult that raised him. And the cult are not very nice people. They're like fundamentalist, they're like a fundamentalist sect that have caused Armageddon, and have essentially wiped out most of the population of the world with this virus that they've created. And in escaping from them, Benji finds this queer group that have created this community where they're trying to survive this Armageddon. The representation in this book is amazing. We have characters on all parts of the spectrum within sexuality, within gender, and everything flows really nicely, I find. The book was super graphic, which I loved, and the descriptions of the virus and the monsters were amazing. And I don't really read a whole lot of horror, but after reading this, I definitely want to read more of this genre because I loved it. It was so cool. And I think as well, this is their debut novel, so I would definitely be interested to reading more of White's work moving forward. But overall, I would recommend this a lot. 5 stars, easy, and yeah, overall just a great book. And the final book I read this month was Atalanta by Jennifer Saint. Can we just appreciate the artwork? It's absolutely gorgeous. As we know, I love a Greek mythology retelling, and Jennifer Saint's work is always amazing. Her debut novel, Ariadne, is sublime, and also I read Electra, which I loved as well. And Atalanta did not disappoint. It's a 5 stars. Easy. Basically, we follow Atalanta, who is left on the side of a mountain when she's born because she's a girl and the king wants a boy. And basically she is raised by Artemis, and essentially she lives with Artemis and her nymphs, and she's super fast, she's amazing with a bow, she's the most skilled woman essentially in Greece. And when Jason and his Argonauts start to embark on their mission for the Golden Fleece, Artemis sends Atalanta to be her representative. So she is the only woman in the Argonauts. And the Argonauts were a collection of the most famous heroes in Greece at the time. So obviously Jason, and then Heracles as well, also known as Hercules. Basically, she's just a badass, and she's stronger than all the men, and she kicks ass throughout the book, and it's amazing. One thing I love about Jennifer Saint is that she really centers on like the stories of the women in Greek mythology, because Greek mythology most of the time is just focused on like the men's stories, and the women are usually just like secondary parts to everything. Whereas Jennifer Saint really like focuses in on the women's stories, and Atalanta is no exception to that. We cover themes of destiny, belonging, desire, and really just the struggle to cement oneself in history. And overall, I mean, it's just a phenomenal book. I would highly recommend everyone reading it. And just look how pretty it is. Come on. Come on. I did get this from the library as well. I'm trying to like consciously stop buying so many books. So I recently got a library card from my local library, and so this was on the shelf. I was like, winner. But because the artwork is so pretty, I also want to buy it now. But yeah, Atalanta. Get it. And that's it. Those are the 9 books I read in April. I hope you enjoyed my monthly wrap-up. If you have any questions about any of the books I spoke about today, or if you have any book recommendations for me for next month, I would super appreciate it. If you enjoyed it, please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe to my channel. My name is Charlie. This is Cover to Cover. And thank you so much for watching. Have a lovely day.